It's very, very reassuring to me. If you haven't been here the last few weeks, or actually many weeks, we've been going through a series primarily looking at the words of Jesus, the life of Jesus, and how it relates to what we in the Christian community call spiritual practices. You might have heard they also called spiritual disciplines. And these practices really, as you've seen, they're exercises. They're meant to function the same way an exercise does when you and I go to the gym. We want to lose weight, we want to feel better, get healthier, we exercise. I could tell you all about how a bench press or running on the treadmill, and it does you no good unless you go and do it. And of course, we've stated over and over again, we've seen that these practices, these exercises, are not the way to get to God. Because no, he does that. He does the getting. He comes to us. He sent his son for us. He runs to us to hold us. Rather, when we practice these exercises, we connect to God in a deeper way. Our spiritual life becomes deeper. It becomes more entrenched like a tree with roots. The roots get deeper and deeper by practicing these spiritual practices. As we walked through quite a few of them, there's 12 in total. And really the practices, if we put these into effect, things like confession, which we talked about last week, things like prayer, things like fasting and Bible study, they're meant to free us. They're meant to give us a freedom that we need from the things in our life that bind us. Worry, anxiety, fear of failure, fear, selfishness. They're meant to just let us break free from those chains if we put them into practice. And today, we look at one that I think on the surface, you guys may not think, at least when I first approached it, I didn't think of it as a discipline or as an exercise or as a practice, and it's the topic of worship. And at first, even this passage, and I'll get into it, doesn't even look like it's about worship. Because when I say worship, if you've been to church any number of years or any number of times, worship means this to many people. It means the worship service. And in this passage, of course, there's none of that. There's no singing, there's no prayer. There's kind of a sermon, I guess. Jesus gives a little bit of a sermon. But there's no church. They're not in church. They're by a well. They're not singing songs. They're not even around other people. And yet, this passage is steeped in what the discipline of worship is. And Jesus is trying to blow the mind of the Samaritan woman and us to make us rethink what the word worship actually means. It's not worship service, though this is a component of it. Now, let me give context here, real quick. I'm going to give the historical context because I know it's a long passage. He's talking about many different confusing things, and here's the setting. Here's Jesus. At this point, he is an extremely well-respected religious teacher. He has followers. He says his disciples went into town to buy food. He has a small staff, and he's very successful. And he sits down at the well, which would mean menial labor. No rabbi does this. No religious leader goes to the well to draw water. Not only does he sit at the well, where it means that he's going to be doing menial labor, but he sits at the well with a woman. And unfortunately for this time in the Bible, women were second-class citizens. No religious teacher would be caught dead sitting alone with a woman by a well. And not only is that happening, but this is a Samaritan woman. And if you know your Bible history, you know that the Jews, which Jesus was, and the Samaritans did not get along. Jewish people actually looked down on Samaritans. They had it was almost like a curse word to call somebody a Samaritan. Because the Samaritans worshipped sort of a branch of Judaism in a different place other than the temple in Jerusalem. There are a number of reasons. They were culturally very similar, but social religiously, they were extremely different. So here's this Jewish religious leader sitting down with a Samaritan woman by the well, and he's talking about worship. Now, I'll get back to the context in a little bit and why it's so radical what Jesus is doing when I sum this up. But here's what we're going to do. I'm going to make it interactive for you guys. We've been trying to do this every week. No confessions. I promised everybody. No more confessions this week, like last week. But on the back here, you all have a pen. You should have a pen in front of you. I'm going to give you about a minute. It shouldn't take you more than that to think of this. I want you to, on the back of your sermon outline, if you have it, there are 3 lines. Okay, so as I talk, you can start to think about this. I want you to take a pen and I want you to write down the 3 things in your life right now that you think are the most valuable. Okay? The 3 things that you think have the most worth in your life right now. It's just 3. And I know you guys are all like, does it have to be number 1, 2, 3? No, it doesn't have to be in order. It could be any, I don't care. 3 things, the first 3 things that come into your head about what are the most valuable. What has the most worth to you? And it could be anything. I don't care what it is. You write it down. Nobody's going to see this list. Don't worry. And bear with me because I'll get back to why you're doing this. Write down just 3 things. The first 3 things that pop into your head. Now, hold on to that list. Maybe turn it on the other side so you go back to the front page of the outline. Everybody's hard thinking. Okay, I'll give you a couple more seconds. I thought this would pop into your head. I don't know. 3 things. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what order. Doesn't matter what they are. How silly you think they are. Doesn't matter. Nobody's going to see this list. You write them down. Flip it back over. Now, what is Jesus saying here about worship? I'll get back to your list. Don't worry. What is Jesus saying about worship? And there's just 2 things that I want to look at today. First, what worship is, according to Jesus. What he says, the words he uses. What worship is, and how we do it, or how we ought to do it. How we get motivated to do it. So it's just simple, what it is and how. The what and the how. Here's worship. First, in this passage, Jesus, I said it doesn't look like he's talking about worship because they're not like at church, they're not singing. He actually uses the word worship 10 times. 9 as a verb, 1 as a noun. 10 times he uses the same exact word. And it's a Greek word called proskuneo. Okay, now I know nobody cares about Greek. I only say that because proskuneo, if you know your English, P-R-O-S is the beginning of the word. And it's where we get our English word for prostrate. And that's a word that we don't even use much in English anymore. There you can think of the old hymn, let angels prostrate fall. Prostrate means to fall on the ground, face down, in front of a king. Prostrate means you are fallen down, you are bowing. And in the image of it is that the king, if a king came into the room, you fall down because the king has so much value. The king has so much worth. That it says that even angels prostrate fall in front of God. And he uses the word prostrate, and it's not that far off from our English word for worship. Our English word for worship, of course, comes from the Old English word, which is funny to say, but I'm going to repeat it quite often today. Worthship. It comes from an Old English word, W-O-R-T-H-S-H-I-P. Worthship. Now, why do I do this language lesson for you? Because the very meaning of the word worship is when you and I place worth in something. Worthship, to worship God, is not to come here on Sunday morning and sing songs and feel good and leave maybe you say the sermon was, didn't do anything for you, or the worship service was great. No. The word worship that's used here, the proskuneo, it's the falling down in front of something that has such value, such worth in your life that you can hardly stare at it. And in actuality, we do this, we give worship to many things, and this is partly why I had you write down the 3 things, and then I'll get back to them. We worship almost every day of our lives. Every day, every week, we are putting worth of some sort into something. And the question is what? And here's what I want to say. My mother's getting older, okay? And as she gets older, for some reason, she likes to give me things. Like give away stuff, okay? Here, I'm going to explain to you what worthship is rather than define it. She likes to give me stuff that she thinks is like heirlooms or whatever. Okay, so a couple years ago, she gave us a set of china plates, plates, cups, and saucers, fine china, that she got at her wedding. So that was a long time ago. And she's never used them. They were kind of a collector's item. And so she has plates and cups and saucers that she gave to us. Now, I took those plates and cups and saucers, I took that china set, and you know where it is? In my house, it's actually in my dining room, in the cabinet, on the ground, closed away, and we've never used it. Not because it's very valuable or anything like that, we never thought to use it. It's just a china set. My kooky old mom gave me a china set, okay, good, and we put it away. Now, I tell you that I have a friend who comes to my house, an imaginary friend, or a real friend. And this friend is, I'm blanking on the word. Is antiquer a word? Is that even a word? Curator, that's what I'm thinking of. Not art, curating antiques. You see how well my notes are written down, how thorough I am? I have a friend who's a curator, and he comes over, or she comes over, and she's an antiquer. And she opens that cabinet, and she says, oh my, do you see these plates and these cups and these saucers? This is a once-in-a-lifetime pattern. Do you know how valuable these things are? This is worth easily hundreds of thousands of dollars. And she says, furthermore, if you clean these, if you go, and there's a special person that can clean these for you, but he lives all the way in Switzerland. But if you go to Switzerland and he cleans them for you, they will be double the value. Do you think that I put those back in the cabinet and say, okay? No. I say, what, a ticket to Switzerland? Fine, okay, let's do it, book it, I'm going. If I can clean them and get double the value. If she says, look, these are of infinitely more value than you ever thought, my entire relationship to those plates and the cups and the saucers changes. I probably take them out and I put them in my glass case for everyone to see. I clean them. I most likely get a lock for that cabinet because I don't want anybody coming. Do you see, when you and I start to worship something, when you and I start to place the right amount of worth on something, our entire relationship to it changes. Not only does our relationship to something change when we start to give it worth, when we worship, but our investment in that thing changes. Let me give you another example. Say I have a piece of land, and the land I bought for about $10,000 US. Follow the math here. Now, my friend, another friend comes to, I got a lot of important friends. I got a curator friend, I got a real estate agent friend. This real estate agent friend comes to me and says, you know that land that you paid $10,000 for? It will easily be worth $1 million if you only build a house there. So I say, okay, how much is a house? If I can make $1 million out of 10,000, how much is a house? And that real estate agent friend says, it's $10,000 to build a house. Done. See, my level of investment in that land changes drastically. Not only my relationship to my china set, but my level of investment in that land changes when that person says, look, all you need is $10,000 and you can make it into $1 million. I don't even blink. Not that I have $10,000, but I would find it. I would move heaven and earth to find $10,000 so that I could build that house to make it even more. When you and I place worth on something, when we worship, our entire relationship to that object changes. We adore it, we cherish it, we polish it, we put it in cabinets and we lock it so no one can touch it. Not only does our relationship change to it, but our investment in it changes. $10,000, that's nothing. Now perhaps the best biblical example of this, and it was interesting that Joe chose the song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord, it's based on Isaiah chapter 6. If you ever read Isaiah chapter 6, go back and do it. I'll sum it for you here. This is the best example of what worship does to you. Isaiah comes into the presence of God. And God looks at Isaiah, and here's what God says. Not exactly, I'm paraphrasing. God says, Isaiah, I have a job. And if you go do this job, not one person's ever going to listen to you. I want you to go speak to people who will never one day ever listen to one word you have to say. You will be an utter failure in this job. And Isaiah says, sign me up. Isaiah says, a job that will be a complete failure? Okay, sign me up. Now, why? Why does Isaiah do something that on the surface looks stupid, looks foolish? God says, here's a job, no one's ever going to listen to you. Isaiah says, send me, thank you. It's because Isaiah, if you read Isaiah 6, he says, my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts, in Isaiah 6:5. Here's what Isaiah does. He starts to give the worship to God. He's always known God in his head. He's known about God. But when he comes into the presence of God, he says, whoa, that's a china set that I will polish. There, I will build the house on there. Send me. I don't care. Is Isaiah courageous? Is he some man of super faith? No. It's that he, for the first time in his life, starts to give God the proper worship. He says, listen, all along I knew you were valuable, but I didn't know you were this valuable. Now, I thought a lot about this. Why are you and I not like Isaiah? What makes you and I much less courageous? Remember, God says to him, listen, go do this job. You'll never succeed in it. And Isaiah says, okay, thank you, send me. What makes him so courageous? Because he worships, but more than that, what makes you and I, if we're honest with ourselves, not so courageous is that our proportions are off. Our proportions. Let me explain what I mean by that. Here's an example. Okay. Our proportions. You say 20,000 won. We're back to money again. 20,000 won has a value, right? Right? Shake your heads if you're awake. 20,000 won has a value. But what value? The value of that 20,000 won entirely depends upon your proportions. If I come to you and I say, here's a pack of gum, pay me 20,000 won for it. You say, ludicrous. Is this magic gum? Am I going to grow smarter? Am I going to, find a husband or wife if I chew this gum? 20,000 won for a pack of gum? Now I come to you and I say, here's a BMW. And you say, how much? And I say, 20,000 won. Do you sit there and say, I don't know, it's a tough decision? No, why? Because 20,000 won's not 20,000 won if your proportions are right. Here's another example. If the pack of gum's not working for you, you're in line at Starbucks, you're getting your coffee, and if you're like me, you hate waiting in line. You've been there for like 10 minutes now for a cup of coffee, and you are just fuming mad. And you look ahead and you see that one person, who's counting out all the coins. You're like, come on, man, move it along. 10 minutes. And then your friend, you have a lot of friends today, your friend hits you in the arm and says, hey, psst, look who's in front of us. And you turn around and you look at that person and it's him or her. That person. And you start to get a little excited. And the first thing you say is, I love your work. You say to this person, oh my gosh, that song you did, that movie you made, it changed me. 10 minutes? Give me 30. Give me an hour. You want to go to lunch with this person. 10 minutes before you saw that person, before you worshipped that person, 10 minutes seemed like a lifetime. Now, what does 10 minutes look like? You say, I don't even want this line to ever move. Don't move, stay, keep counting your coins. Let's talk to this person, this famous celebrity. See, listen, our proportions are off. And this is what hinders us from giving proper worship. Last example. You know that I have a little daughter. She's 3 years old. And my little 3-year-old daughter has a baby doll. I named her Jacqueline Bouvier. My daughter can't say that, so she just calls her baby doll. Now, my 3-year-old daughter has to go to sleep with that baby doll for the nap and for her at night. So when it's time to go to sleep, we say, 3-year-old daughter, go get your baby doll. She gets her baby doll. And she loves the feel of that baby doll. She loves the texture of the baby doll. The doll kind of creeps me out, to be quite honest, but she loves it. She loves how it feels. She loves sleeping with it, putting it under the blanket, the comfort of it. Okay, now I go to my 3-year-old daughter and I say, 3-year-old daughter, I have the keys to a very large house, a very, very large mansion. I will gladly give you the keys to this mansion if you will only give me baby doll. Now, do you think... my 3-year-old daughter, many of you, she would look at me for about a second or two, right? My daughter would probably look at me and say, no, baby doll. And of course, you and I, we would look at her and we would say, of course, her proportions are off. She's 3 years old. What does she know about a mansion by a lake with many houses, with many rooms and houses? What does she know? Her proportions are entirely off. How do you think God looks at you and me? How How do you think the Lord of the universe looks down at us and says, aren't you tired of playing with your baby dolls when I have a mansion of infinite joy for you? C.S. Lewis has one of the greatest quotes, and I love it. I whip it out every once in a while when I want to get my proportions right, and I put it in your bulletin. I'm not going to read the whole thing because we don't have the time today. But he says, it seems that our Lord would find our desires not too strong but too weak. We are half-hearted creatures, fooling about with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy is offered to us, like an ignorant child who wants to go on making mud pies in a slum because he cannot imagine what is meant by the offer of a holiday at sea. Listen, this is worth-ship. It's throwing away our baby dolls so we can have the mansion. It's putting the proper worth in the proper place. Now, I read you write down your 3 things. And I'm thinking, because I know many of you in this room, that the 3 things you wrote down are good things. I don't think any of you wrote down that you place your worth or value in your bank account. I don't think anybody wrote that down. If you did, okay. I'm sure you wrote down things like your 3 things are probably your family, maybe your children, maybe your spouse. Those are my 3. Worthship is saying these are good things. They're not ultimate things. These are good things, but if you and I place our worthship in these things, they will drive us to fear, to anxiety, to control. And Jesus uses this word proskuneo to say, fall on your face, get rid of the dolls in your life for the mansions. How? How do you get this? I spent a long time talking about the what is worth it because I want us to reshape our paradigm. Worship is not Sunday morning just singing. Worthship is when you and I are sick and tired of playing with mud pies in the slum and we accept the offer of the holiday by the sea that God gives us. God looks at us and says, I've created you for infinite freedom and joy and rest. Why do you have anxiety? Why does it bother you so much when somebody slights you? Why are you so upset when you don't get that job or that promotion? Why? Those are mud pies. Those are dolls. I give you way more than that. And in this passage, Jesus tells the Samaritan woman how. It's a lot longer in your outline. I'm running out of time a little bit. I want to summarize it this way. Jesus says to the Samaritan woman, there will come a time when you worship in spirit and in truth. And he means in spirit, meaning inside. You're going to worship in your spirit to God. But he means truth, and this is a weird word that he uses, aletheia in Greek. He says there's a truth that you have to set your mind on if you want to start giving God the ultimate worthship in your life. There's a truth that you and I have to meditate on every morning when we wake up. There's a truth that you and I have to know. And he says this, the truth is, Jesus says, in my hour. My hour. And every time Jesus talks about his hour, he's talking about his death. He looks at a Samaritan woman. And the whole thing about the husbands, you've had 5 husbands, now the man you're living with is not your husband. Jesus looks at this woman and says, I know you. I know your mistakes. I know your flaws. I know where you're broken. And I'm giving you something. I'm giving you my death so that you can stop playing with dolls and start to live in the mansion. You can have infinite joy and peace, Jesus says. You can have living water that will never make you thirsty again. You can have it all in your life if you and I see his death. We see that he dies for us. We see that he takes everything from us, that all the time that we've spent playing around with idle things, and Jesus says, it's no more. The hour's come. Now you can worship in spirit and in truth. Meditate on the truth of what I've done for you. Much of this Samaritan woman, you imagine her reaction? She even looks at him and says, why are you a Jew talking to me? The inability for you and me to give proper worthship is probably due to the fact that you and I have an inability to know how much we were worth-shipped by God. God looks at us and says, I look at you as a radiant, beautiful, worthy creature. and I know it so much that I'm going to send my son to die for you. Have you felt worth-shipped by God? To the extent that you feel that God looks at you and gives you worth, you will no longer be captivated by those 3 things you wrote down, but you'll be able to give him infinite worth. As I close, I want to close with a story. If you've never read the book Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan, please do. It's an allegory. It's a classic allegory of Christian life. And it's about a man named Christian, a character, and he's on a journey, a spiritual journey. And he's trying to find the celestial city. He's trying to worship. He's trying to find how he can give God ultimate worship in his life. The problem is, he's got this thing on his back called a burden. And the burden weighs him down and it slows him down, and he's not able to make as much progress in the allegory as he makes this long trail to travel to God. And along the way, he meets many people who kind of make him go different directions. He's supposed to go through the narrow gate, and he goes slowly because of the burden that's on his back. And he meets a couple people, and one guy says, go this way, and he goes that way, and he stumbles into quicksand. And another guy says, no, go this way, and he goes towards a mountain that's going to collapse and fall on him. And finally, one of his friends says, no, just go back, go to the narrow gate. So finally he does, and he does it slowly, and he does it arduously. And he carries this burden. And he carries it through the gate, and he gets to the cross. And he says, he ran thus until he came at a place somewhat ascending, and upon that place stood a cross. And a little below in the bottom, a sepulcher, which is another way to say a tomb that's carved into the rock. So I saw, the narrator says, in my dream that just as Christian came up with the cross, his burden loosed from off his shoulders and fell from off his back and began to tumble and continued to do so till it came to the mouth of the sepulcher, the grave, where it fell in, and I saw it no more. Then was Christian glad and lightsome, and he said with a merry heart, he hath given me rest by his sorrow in life, by his death. Thus, and he gives a little poem. He says, thus far did I come laden with my sin, nor could aught ease the grief that I was in, till I came hither. What a place is this? Must here be the beginning of my bliss? Must here the burden fall off my back? Must here the strings that bound it to me crack? Blessed cross, blessed sepulcher, blessed rather be the man that was there put to shame for me. The burden falls from his back only when he looks at the cross, and he says, blessed more is the man who was put there for me. True worship comes when you know the Lord of the universe puts worth in you, and he shows it through his Son on the cross for you, for me. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, make